Hi, everybody. Good to see, like Justine, a lot of familiar faces. Good to see you all again. We are back presenting on the Town of Westport Draft Barrier Beach Management Plan. And the reason we are back in this form is that the plan has gone to public comment. So you may have seen there's a draft PDF of this document on the town's website. It's been distributed to a couple of your community leaders, so it can be distributed, further within the community as well. And we are here really introducing that formalized plan, so that you all can kind of understand exactly what it's about, and we can, talk through some of the, key points that we are diving deeply into, some of the key takeaways, some of the, maybe more controversial points in it as well. We want to open the discussion up to all of that. And I really just want to highlight that this is a draft and this is a public comment period. So we want to hear from you. Nothing in this is set in stone. This plan is really intended to be created in collaboration with the town, with the state, with the public. And the plan at the end of the day is meant to benefit and help preserve, critical resources in the town. So with that in mind, we can go to the next slide.
Oh, hold on. I think.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the project team is all on the call here. We have the town of Westport, represented by Michael Burris, town planner, Chris Capone of Conservation Commission, Dia Wheeler, assistant town planner. So thanks to them for joining. We also have representation from Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management. Rebecca Haney, the state coastal geologist, is on the call. From Woods Hole Group, you have myself, I'm Connor Austin, Justine Rooney as well, and then Marina Chiafolo is on the call as well. So this group has been working since about last February. We're almost at a year, actually probably exactly at a year since we really kicked off what started as kind of a field investigations of the site, establishing existing conditions, and then beginning to engage with you all as the summer came around. Next slide, please. So why are we here? The town of Westport recognized that they have vulnerable infrastructure on sensitive resources. And these are specifically Atlantic Ave, critical roadways, the Nubble and Beach Ave roadway, and East Beach Road on East Beach. And the thing that Atlantic Ave, the Nubble, and East Beach all have in relation to one another is that they are barrier beaches. And barrier beaches are naturally formed landscapes that come from the deposition of sediments and cobble. I'm repeating myself a bit because I know that I know many of you have been on our calls before.
Connor,
yeah,
1 second. I think, Kevin, I don't know if you're trying to share the screen, but you keep someone's taking control of the sharing. I'm taking it back. It's my share. Go ahead, Connor.
Thanks. We can also always send out these slides to the whole group afterwards. So yeah, nothing here is, and we're recording the meeting, so all this information will be available to everybody. But what I was saying was we're studying barrier beaches in the town and barrier beaches with public roadways behind them because barrier beaches are unique. They are dynamic. They respond to the ocean in very particular ways, and they therefore demand to be managed in very particular ways. They're also very significant to the town as a whole, not just the folks that use them on a day-to-day basis, but they also buffer the inland areas from coastal storms and flooding. They take the brunt of coastal storms and hurricanes and tropical storms from the south that are coming and washing and protecting the river and the inland communities as well. They provide essential habitat for protected wildlife, such as terns and plovers. There's beach grass. There can be sensitive dune species as well. And then lastly, of course, they support public access and recreation. So we all love to use the beach. I think that's why all of us are here today, is because I think collectively this group just loves beaches and wants to protect beaches. Next slide, please. So you've heard from us a few times, and you've heard, I think, what did we start off with? We had a Coastal Processes 101 meeting back in March. And that was really to establish, what is the condition of Westport's beaches, East Beach in particular, in our meeting with you all. Why might they be in the condition they are? East Beach is rapidly eroding, and that's plainly visible to everybody there. So what is the process happening behind that? Why are the waves so damaging at East Beach? How is the beach responding? What is Overwash doing? What are dune vegetation plants doing? How are we, vulnerable? And then how do we take that to how do we become more resilient? And we can look at that from two different angles. We can look at that as our day-to-day on the beaches. How do we manage dogs, or how do we protect public access, or how do we manage sediment that's on the roadways? All of these features kind of come up on a day-to-day basis, and we're trying to create a regulatory framework or a beach management plan framework which consolidates all the various guidance across the state and the town regulations as well, so that it can be clear how to manage this on a day-to-day basis to protect the resource. We simultaneously, though, performed a beach and dune restoration feasibility study at all three of these beaches and laid out the costs and benefits of larger engineered nourishment projects. I think at East Beach, this is the presentation that we held back in July when we presented on something on the scale of a 200,000 cubic yard nourishment project, and that is 10,000 truckloads of sediment. What would it be like if we brought 10,000 truckloads of sediment to East Beach? Would we be able to protect it? Would we be able to restore ourselves to the 1970 condition of the beach? And the answer is we could build it, and it would improve protection, but it wouldn't last forever. So there is a lifespan to these projects, and there's also a significant cost. So all of that is laid out in a beach and dune restoration feasibility study. So we've been looking at these day-to-day and these long-term visions at the same time. Since October, the town was awarded a grant to take the Barrier Beach Management Plan to permitting. That means to go through this public process and to present it to you and solicit feedback and present it to the select board and start to take it to a notice of intent phase. So while the beach and dune restoration feasibility study is there and something that I'm happy to talk about anytime, most of this presentation is focused on the beach management plan itself. Next slide, please. So what is the intent of the Barrier Beach Management Plan? It is really consolidating many different perspectives and many different interests, trying to protect the public interests, trying to protect the state's interests, trying to protect the private residents' interests. There are many stakeholders, many property owners, public infrastructure, a lot going on in these dynamic coastlines, and trying to reduce that into clear, coordinated guidance for how to respond to erosion, how to respond to overwash, to damage to infrastructure, how to do this from a cost-effective basis. Putting large-scale nourishment out in the beach can combat erosion. Is it cost-effective? And then lastly, how do we make sure that all of these actions are consistent with the Wetlands Protection Act and Massachusetts Endangered Species Act, all of those regulations which are formed to help preserve the barrier beach systems that we know and need. So this plan that Justine is about to jump into and give you kind of the lowdown of what is actually inside of it, it's developed for both you as an audience and it's developed for the town. It's going to lay out roles and responsibilities for the town, but it's also going to lay out best practices for property owners and how to manage your own property. Next slide. Justine.
Thanks, Connor. So like Connor said, I want to reiterate, I feel like the reason we're all here is because all from our various perspectives, we're super passionate about this resource. And we want to hear from you all as a critical stakeholder because we know that this place is really special and important to you. So we are excited as a part of this planning process to hear about how we can gather feedback from you and help put that into this plan. So I want to make sure that you all understand that you're here. We appreciate your time and we're really grateful for it. When we look at this planning exercise, a barrier beach management plan is really trying to take where we are right now and take this moment of time and say, okay, what are the existing conditions of this resource and how is the town managing supporting long-term resilience for the barrier beaches in a manner that serves the public interests and helps prevent storm damage to coastal resources and infrastructure. So it looks to promote consistent and transparent day-to-day management practices on public lands and public infrastructure. And as Connor said, the guidance that's set out for the town on how they should manage their infrastructure can be used as guidance on private property, but this isn't directly saying what you have to do on your private property. That being said, the practices in terms of laying out how to redistribute material, etc., are best practices and are something that should be followed when taking on such a practice. It established procedures for seasonal operations, storm response, and resource protection by helping to establish roles and responsibilities. The plan is to be used as a tool to understand the local processes and to support place-based best practices and to ensure that town practices comply with local, state, and federal recreation regulations. Woo, it's the evening, such as managing coastal resources in a manner that's consistent with the Wetlands Protection Act. So hopefully you've seen the cover of this beach management plan. If not, you're also welcome to email me back. I'll send you a link. We have the plan itself, which we understand is a very thick, complex document. We own that. We needed to have all that information living in one place so that it was all together, because that's a really confusing part. We have town staff that will turn over. Someone has institutional knowledge that someone else doesn't have. So that's part of why this is a really important municipal document. One of the things that we do want to talk to you all about this evening is what guidance do you feel like you need to help understanding better, and how could we form maybe a separate guidance document or a publication that you feel like is easier and has just the material that you care about. So know that that's on the table as well. We appreciate that this is a really long document. Um, we we have the Barrier Beach Management Plan, but then we have various appendices as well. One are just some standard definitions and acronyms. We know that we're commonly using terms that feel really familiar to us, but might not feel familiar to you. So those are in there. We have a public outreach memo, which summarizes all of the public outreach we've done. This is actually really important for us too, to document who we've talked to when. And like Connor mentioned, I think it will be a helpful tool if you want to look back and see, oh, when did you talk about the feasibility study? I'd like to watch that video. Well, the date is associated in that public outreach memo so that you have that all in one place. Again, I love a planning document. I know not everyone does. So there's a lot in here. We have wetland delineation memos. Those are super helpful if you want to understand the resource area types that are right along East Beach. Then we also have laboratory and grain size analysis. This can be a really helpful tool if you're looking to bring in compatible material for nourishment. The town is already paid to figure out what's on the beach, and we have that there, and we can talk about that more. There's an existing conditions plan set, another helpful tool for us, and that Westport Beach and Dune Restoration Feasibility Study that Connor mentioned, that is in there as well. So my hope is that as we're introducing this plan to you, you're some of the first people we came to announce that the plan is available for viewing. We have an open comment period through February 13th. We are going to you email me and I will take your public comments. We are recording all public comments And we're going to create a document where we have a response to your comment that either references where your feedback was incorporated into the plan, or if you were asking for a response or clarification, how we can provide that. In addition to that, that will be attached to the final plan. As an example, Elephant Rock Beach Club sent me an email. I was able to document and they found an error and I can change that in the plan. So your feedback isn't just something we are hearing and then doing nothing with. It's really important to us to continue to build trust and to have transparency with this planning process. This is just a long slide with a lot of words on it, but I wanted to have a page that shows what resource documents we use in the development of this plan. Like Connor had mentioned, we take these resource documents which define how an activity should be done. For example, how you should do dune nourishment. And then we look at the existing conditions at the site and try to tailor it to the site-specific conditions. So all of those are in the plan. There's some links throughout as well, but I wanted to put it in the PowerPoint as well. When we look to establish those best practices, like I just mentioned, we looked at things like understanding practices that harm dune vegetation. So one of the sections of the plan is how to promote healthy dune vegetation. We look at what's being done and what do we need to clarify what you shouldn't do. So when we look at beach grass in our world, in our office, that is one of our favorite things in here. Beach grass has this incredible root system that goes super deep and it helps to stabilize dune by trapping windblown sand, reducing erosion from wave action and runoff. This is important. It's a really critical natural resource. I call it in my world, and it's natural infrastructure that we want to protect. So when we look at practices such as putting vegetation on the dune, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard before to put your Christmas tree on the dune and that will help stabilize it. That's actually a practice we don't promote because it can bring in pests or it can suffocate dune vegetation. And then we have other practices like burying dune vegetation with nourishment. So those are things that we explain in the plan. You don't want to do X, but you should do Y. It gives a little more detail. And again, this is to help the town when they go to do an activity that they have guidance on exactly how it should be done on public infrastructure and public property. So Connor's going to talk a little bit more about, we'd already had some feedback and we wanted to dig into a few topics a bit more. So Connor, do you want to, I'll transfer it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Just another hot topic and one that is especially pertinent to East Beach is the management of overwash material. So overwash is the sediment that is pushed by storms and waves over the dune, and sometimes it is the dune itself, and washing into the back barrier, often across roadways or into parcels on the north side of the road. So overwash is a natural process. This is just how barrier beaches respond to storm waves, and especially to sea level rise. As sea level rises and storms start to put increased pressure on a barrier beach, the barrier beach is overturning on itself, overwashing, essentially in a way that it's almost bending so it doesn't break. You know, the pressure of the ocean is pushing and the beach is kind of moving landward in a way that it can accommodate and absorb that energy without becoming completely washed away. And so ensuring that that process is occurring is really critical to the preservation of this barrier beach system as a whole. It doesn't come down to property boundaries, it comes down to the barrier beach as a whole. And that is something that the town of Westport needs to think long-term about, is the preservation of this barrier, because folks on this call have seen the Let break through, and that can have really significant impacts to the Westport River and the harbors and the access and sediment transport within the river itself. So as we look to manage overwash, there's a significant section in this beach management plan with a lot of language. And I know some of you will be able to dig right into that, and we really welcome your feedback. So please look at that language and tell us what you think. But from just starting at the real, like the givens, we want to avoid removal of sediment from the barrier beach. There have been practices reported in the past of removal of sediment from this barrier beach system, and that is something that this document very specifically says do not do. All of the sediment in the barrier beach is really vital to its strength, and we want to preserve as much of it as we can. And then as we begin to manage overwash, and as it's pushed from one place to another, or as our sediment is brought in for nourishment, all of that needs to be done under conservation oversight. We have Chris Capone. Chris is incredibly knowledgeable about how to further the interests of the resource areas, to stabilize and bolster these resources to protect the barrier beach in the long term. So working with the Conservation Commission on managing overwash or building artificial dunes is really critical. And then lastly, we have a best practices section on overwash management. So as the highway department pushes sediment to the side of the road, many of you private property homeowners are then left, with a big berm and no way to get into your property, and you need to deal with that. And that can be a difficult problem to handle, and everybody has to handle it their own way. So there's specific guidance about how to do that. For instance, use the sediment to fill areas of scour, areas that have been eroded out because of overwash runneling across your property. Don't use that material to raise up areas that have vegetation, because that vegetation is very valuable. We need to preserve vegetation as much as possible. Its root systems and its stems all support the long-term stability of the barrier beach. And then don't place this material right back in the beach in little miniature headlands, because that becomes a focus for wave energy, which can pick up the sediment and then wash it downstream more rapidly than if it was integrated to elevate your parcels. So all of these sorts of factors are detailed in the Barrier Beach Management Plan, and they're all derived from guidelines from the state, such as the Guidelines for Barrier Beach Management in Massachusetts. That's an older 1994 document, but then more recently, the Applying Massachusetts Coast Wetlands Regulation Manual, the Coastal Manual, as they call it, which was prepared by CZM and DEP in 2020. And these really hammer home on coastal processes and why we need to manage sediment the way that we do. So essentially the point I'm trying to get at here is that overwash is a natural process, and it needs to be allowed to occur as natural as possible, because this is the way that the barrier is responding to sea level rise and responding to storms. And it's actually, not to anthropomorphize it too much, protecting itself in a way by doing so.
Yeah, I would just add quickly too, I think as you all have an opportunity to dig into that section, Patty and I have talked before about, developing resources in a way that feel approachable. And so if you have any feedback on how you feel language or material could be made more approachable, or you could better understand, or you want more clarification on various topics, that's something we would love feedback on, because it's helpful. First of all, I learn a ton from all of you all the time, from all of your feedback, but I want to make sure that you feel like you could talk to your neighbor about what's happening, because as Connor has said, this is not just on a parcel by parcel basis either. If there's one of these large overwatch events, it's likely that you all already work together. And as you continue, we want to make sure that you're able to have conversations using the same language. So we're here to help with any of that communication.
Thanks, Justine.
Mm-hmm.
So the last bits on redistributing overwash materials, things that you can look to find in the beach management plan. And again, just like Justine said, we do want to tailor these to be functional for you, useful for you, like that end of season close-up guidance that was prepared, I think, back in August. So we want to prepare things for you so you can know how to implement routine nourishment practices. Something that many of the residents do is purchase sediment, compatible sediment, and place it on their beaches. But there are ways to do so which are good for the beach, and there are ways to do so which actually can create erosion, can almost promote erosion. So what I'm getting at is if you create very steep slopes with a dune, an artificial dune, you're actually creating a very reflective environment. The waves can wash up closer to your beach, and then they can break immediately on your dune. And that brings all of the energy of the wave right to your doorstep, and then that can erode. Whereas if you create very wide, gentle slopes, that wave has to travel over a longer distance and it starts to break further offshore. This is, similar to the process as to why sandbars are great for breaking waves offshore. That energy starts to dissipate before it comes to your doorstep. So by the time it comes rushing up the dune, it's just gonna, slowly either sink back into the ocean or sink into the sediment itself and cause less erosion. There are also permitting requirements, which are really just there to support the best practices. So one of those might be compatible sediment. Compatible sediment means bringing in material that is no finer or no coarser than the sediment which exists on site. This picture here shows, a mix of sediment of like sand, gravels, and cobbles. And that is what we see across most of East Beach. And all of those materials are good in their own way and can respond to storms in their own way. But materials which aren't compatible would be a boulder. A boulder would actually have an adverse impact on the barrier beach. It would be creating another one of those reflective environments, which can then cause erosion of your beach or erosion of adjacent parcels. Ticking down here, storm-related emergency dune repair. A lot of dune repair might be happening in, I don't want to say a panic, but in a rush, because there has been a major storm and a property is at risk. And we need to do all we can to fix that issue. And by establishing these practices now, we want to make sure that those quick decisions are made thoughtfully and are based on sound science. So we've created dune nourishment design guidelines, slopes, sediments, vegetation, etc., all that can be used for you all as you go and actually perform your own individual nourishment projects to help build resilience. The last bullet there is a note on timing and wildlife protection, because just to note that this area is a sensitive resource, not just for the people who use it, but for the birds that use it. And it's incredibly important to work with Chris Capone and time your projects appropriately so that we don't cause an adverse impact, which can actually become a knock on the town's record if there's an accident of that kind with a protected bird.
I will add on to that, Connor, that it's important to note that the Barrier Beach Management Plan looks to all three resource areas, Atlantic Ave, Beach Ave, and East Beach Road. So the guidance is supposed to be able to be used in all three locations. And I think as you look to the plan, you're going to hopefully see that there might be pieces that might not feel like they relate specifically to East Beach because the plan needed to work for all three resource areas. But yeah, timing and wildlife is definitely a great example of, this plan is being developed to help the town understand also what regulations they need to follow. So as an example on the timing, the town needs to work with Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program to make sure that they are avoiding a take of rare species, that there isn't an accidental kill of a rare species in a sensitive resource area. And that relationship is really important for the town to have a good working relationship with Natural Heritage because they are part of the order of conditions process. So all of these pieces are tied into one another. So we wanted to, not talk at you for too long. We wanted to provide time to hear from you and answer questions. And Marina is going to try to keep track. So maybe we can't do this perfectly, but we can try. But we'd love if we could try using the hand raising feature so that we can kind of give people their time. And we can jump back to any topics we want to. Who would like to go first? I'm just jealous. I feel like Kevin's been eating popcorn and I'm jealous of the popcorn. Jeffrey, do you want to go first?
I didn't really want to, but my first thought is, and we're new to East Beach in the last few years, and we tried planting sea holly. And sea holly is similar to the beach grasses that creates a deep root system. But I see a lot of our neighbors, adding sand after an erosion, and then it washes away. And it's sort of like, why are you trying the same system year after year? And is there any way to create a reef or a barrier further out that will absorb those waves?
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. That's a great question. And yeah, it's important to, sometimes it feels like we're fighting a losing battle here as you put sediment out and you see the next storm come and wash it away. And so I understand that, and I'm with you. And I think that planting vegetation is a really good kind of different approach to trying to preserve your beach. So as Justine, I think one of her figures there was showing the depth of root systems of different dune plants like American beach grass or switchgrass. I don't think sea holly was on there, but as I'm Googling it right now, it looks to be a beautiful blue colored plant. And those root systems are, yeah, I'm saying everything that you've already said. The root systems are really good, and preserving those plants is very important. To the point about, maybe looking at more creative out of the box ideas like an offshore breakwater. That is something that I think has come up several times in the town. And it's a valid question. It's a difficult project to actually complete. One, the depths of the beach are steep offshore. So that if you were going to build an offshore breakwater, even if it only pierced the surface by a couple feet, it would actually be a monstrous structure underground. And the cost of that is really high. I don't have any numbers for you, but the cost of that is really high. And the benefit is to protect a natural resource, which if we allow to do its thing, will protect itself. The other thing about breakwaters themselves are that they are good at dissipating wave energy, but they don't do anything about total water levels. So when a storm surge from a hurricane is pushing up the Atlantic and pushing itself to Westport and then up the Westport River, those water levels are really determined at a large scale by this meteorological system. Breaking the waves can help reduce the energy, but that water is still going to come pouring over East Beach because the elevation is so low. So building elevation in your dunes and building beach width can actually do a little bit more for you in the long run.
I would also add, I think, Jeff, I'm glad you brought up that question. As we look at this, the Barrier Beach guidance includes smaller actions. Connor kind of alluded at this. Any activity we're going to do is going to have trade-offs, and there's no silver bullet here that is going to completely stop the sand from moving. These practices that we look at the day-to-day practices, they look at long-term resiliency from a different approach. I understand they might not seem as Connor's big nourishment study was probably more exciting to talk about, but these practices, although they feel really small, can have a big impact. So, Kevin, I think you had your hand next?
Yes. Good evening. Obviously, you guys know I'm Kevin Kurt, president of the East Beach Association. I reside at 598 Sanford Road in Westport, Mass, and also own a lot at 85 East Beach Road. We've taken some time to go through these several hundred pages to the best of our ability. And I've prepared a little statement in regards to that. And if you indulge and give me a minute or so to read it, I greatly appreciate that. So, we of the East Beach Improvement Association wanted to be known, that we're really not in agreement with this draft as presented here today. We are in complaint against many of the proposed items in it. It does not address the intent of any of the past recommendations of both the climate resiliency study and the local MVP study that were done in the previous few years. The The cobble policy that we agreed to with the town has been ignored. It's been changed. The recommendations in the draft go against some of the state's recommended barrier beach guidelines. Okay, the recommendation in this draft will accelerate the loss of the integrity of the area and exacerbate damage to both the property and the infrastructure as it exists today. In addition, we have a litigated agreement with the town of Westport that recognizes the property rights of owners, taxpayers, and with respect to their properties. This current draft makes no effort to address the concerns and sets us up for a managed retreat, which was repeatedly deferred in the past studies. Now, the plan gives short shrift to our repeated efforts to share accumulated data along with an opportunity to sit with your draft making panel. I'd like to thank you, but as this fits, I do not endorse adopting this, and we take complaint of the way it is written and look forward to seeing if there's any opportunity to change it.
Thanks for your statement, Kevin. I really appreciate you all being here. And I think the best way for you to provide feedback at this point is to provide any written feedback about specific language that you're referencing and send it over.
That is the intent of the whole entire process, which was started with the help of Michael Burris and the planning board to get grant money to address not only the infrastructure problems and the private property problems and how we're going to go forward in resolving these issues in the future. We've had, past events happen which were not in any way, shape, or form beneficial to that barrier beach. And we're hoping to avoid that happening again with the help of both the town, with the help of CZM, in regards to making this a resource which is capable of being preserved in such a fashion that generations in the future can use it in a fashion that it has already been used. There are many items in which I'll address with you guys in writing directly that definitely need to be addressed in this plan. I know we use the word draft, but at this point, as it sits, it has to be adjusted, or it's not going to be beneficial to anyone, not the property owners, not the town, and it would be a waste of state funds once again in order to solve a problem that we constantly look down the road at or look down the barrel of and then come up with something, and don't take this the wrong way, but something as silly as planting grass instead of trying to do something that's going to preserve the infrastructure for maybe not forever, to use Connor's words, but for the long term.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I mean, I hear you on those points, and yeah, like Justine said, that written statement is the perfect thing to submit to us so that we can address, because there are many points in there I can't think which ones to respond to necessarily, but we hear you that it's a dire situation out there, and that you feel like that this resource is slipping between your fingers, and that you want to do something to stop that. And then I also hear you that planting beach grass sounds so small scale that it won't do nothing compared to really large scale investment to combat an issue. And I think, yes, I don't know if I have
And I want to
the right
reiterate that
response for you.
I feel like that's why it's important to state that this guidance is really meant to serve all three of those resource areas. So I hear you about thinking about large scale projects that could happen along the beach, but it's also important that we understand if we're going to do certain activities like beach grass planting, we understand the spacing the grass should be at. Maybe that's not necessarily relevant to every single property along East Beach, but it's certainly relevant along other sections of the barrier beaches in this plan. So the planning exercise looks to those things to make sure we have guidance.
I understand that. So the question now becomes, how much research, how much data has been accumulated? And did you take into consideration all of the things that pertain directly to East Beach in regards to past litigation with the town to, come up with a solution to at least keep that road somewhat protected by relocating material to the south side only versus splitting it in half? In addition to
Mhm.
other things such as accumulated amounts of material that have been removed in the past, trying to turn it around and say, okay, what are we going to do to replace that, or at least protect what's left? I understand that there are regulations in regards to Barrier Beach nourishment and so on and so forth, but like I've stated from the beginning, our situation is somewhat unique, and I think we need a little bit more. We need to explore this. I'd like you to invite me to sit down in some of your panels so I can get some of my points across with data to back them up, and we can find out, if nothing else, no one's ever explored a joint partnership between the private property owners and the town, that we were all invested into this equally. Might make it easier to go get a grant versus solely relying on grant money and then falling back on the excuse that, well, gee, if we use grant money to buy material, you're going to have to let somebody walk across your property. We've never sat down to even find out if there's a way to be able to circumvent that. That doesn't mean that us as a whole in a community want to keep that beach for ourselves. That is definitely not the case. We have people that walk up and down the beach, share with us every year. The problem becomes, how do we save this for future generations?
And I
And
think that's
that's
a great
why we're here.
That's a great question, Kevin. And I want to, and I should have said it before, and I apologize, but we don't intend to just come to you today and say, send me an email. Bye. Right? The door is open and we would like to keep talking. And we want to hear your ideas and we want to hear your thoughts. And I feel like us being here right now is because you have all wanted to be involved with this process, and we deeply respect that. So we can come back again. We can set up another meeting. We can go over details. Like we are open to meeting and discussing and having these conversations further, Kevin, for sure. This
Well,
isn't
I appreciate that. And I guess that leads to my next question. Is February 13th a drop dead date? Because there's not a whole lot of time for us to continue this conversation. If you guys intend on maybe wrapping this up in a neat little package and ending it in the spring and pushing it along to the town for adoption. That's not
That's a great
something that we're looking for. We're going to do what we can to prevent that from happening.
That's a great question, Kevin. I think it would be really helpful for us to have the majority of comments, the bulk of comments by February 13th, so we can take a full look at everything and then we can incorporate it. We're happy to come back after February 13th and still have another discussion. But it'd be really great for us in terms of the planning timeline to be incorporating documents, incorporating that feedback and responding to it, to be able to have some deadlines. So we're not saying like February 13th drops, we're never going to talk to you about it again. We're walking away. We're happy to keep talking. But we need to put some guardrails in so we can take everything, incorporate it into the plan, respond, come back and talk to you.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity, and I'm sure we'll be having much more conversation. I'd like to give someone else an opportunity to share their feelings, and if I, think of something to share, then I'll raise my hand again. But thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you, Kevin. Anyone else? If you don't know how to use the hand raising feature, you can also jump in. That's okay too. Yeah, Barbara?
Barbara.
Hi. So you did this research in 1 year, correct? Or not even yet, a whole year. Is that correct?
When
Hello?
you say research, are you referring to the feasibility study or the beach management plan. It is true that this planning process started last year.
Okay, so I'm concerned that I see other beaches and other places. I know ours is unique, but people are allowed to put, you know, seawalls and everything else. I know that you're Woods Hole and you probably would not think that that was a good idea, but I'm very concerned that if you think I'm with Kevin on, I know you say you'll listen to us until February 13th, but if that's a hardcore date that you're going to then give the town and then they're going to approve it, we didn't really have a say in any of it, and we own the properties.
The properties, this plan does not seek to say what you can and cannot do on your property. This plan is a guidance document for the public parcels and the public infrastructure. So for example, the overwash, what do they do when that overwash is on the roadway?
They
So
take
if you,
it and they put it on their public beach. That's what they do instead of putting it back on our property.
I hear you, Barbara.
Right.
Like Connor said, it's explicitly said that it is not allowed. We have had many interdepartmental meetings about this topic. It will be pushed to the edge of the roadway layout. And when you talk about seawalls or those other ideas, those are things that you can continue to explore on your property. And we could talk to you about, you know, whether that would be beneficial on your type of property if you have specific questions. But this
So
plan,
is that something that is, would you ever be open to something like that? Or instead of
Beach.
Teeny Cobble, something that, you know, or the seagrass, which is probably not going to grow, but something that we could do in front to mitigate some of the erosion.
I think if that's something that the majority of this group have more questions about, are like approaches that would really work on your place-based property, we could set up a meeting and talk about that. That's not something that would be under the purview of a beach management plan. And I get why that feels frustrating because you have really specific questions and that this plan doesn't feel like it answers that, but it's because the intent of the plan is to do something different. But we're here and we can set up times, you know, if we want to have another meeting with the East Beach Association and you want to look at individual pinch points or you have specific questions about a really specific site, we could answer those questions and we're happy to. It just isn't a seawall or consideration of a seawall isn't something that would be in a beach management plan.
Okay, thank you.
No, but it's a great question, Barbara, and we're happy to come back and keep talking about these topics.
Thank you.
Mm. Absolutely.
Any more questions? Yeah, Paul?
Hi, was kind of hoping that you could maybe go back to Kevin's question about why you would want to split the overwash cobble onto both sides of the road when obviously it came from the beach and wouldn't it have to go back there? Now I understand and I did read the plan. It states that where it lands is where it should lay. But if they're clearing the road and they're pushing it to the wrong side of the beach, that is no longer done naturally. That would be something that's obviously man-made. I don't understand the reason for that. Maybe you can explain it to us.
Yeah, definitely. Connor, do you want to talk a little bit more about?
Sure. Yeah, Paul, thanks. That's a great question, and I absolutely understand, you know, why you have it.
Great question.
Yeah, I had similar questions personally, and you know, as we modeled sediment transport and as we looked at the coastal processes and the erosive trends of East Beach in particular, it comes back to that process of sediment overwash that I was talking about in earlier slides, being the natural process of resilience for a barrier beach system. If you allow overwash to occur, then it can continue to take sediment essentially from the beach and from the dunes and build elevation inland and slowly moves landward with rising sea level. I realize that slowly moving landward means slowly losing seaward facing properties. And so I think your question is, why can't we just take that sediment, put it right back on those properties and, say, hey, the condition has been returned to what it used to be. When we take the sediment from the roadways and we put it back, it's often placed on the dune in a way that's actually not how the landform was originally. We can create really high elevations and really steep beach faces. And when we create those steep beach faces, we're creating erosive conditions, reflective conditions, where, like I was saying earlier, waves are able to, we've eroded the beach, but we've steepened the dune. So now waves are able to travel closer and they're now breaking right on the dune themselves. And so that's essentially leading the wave energy to remove that sediment out of the system faster than it would have if that sediment had been sequestered within kind of the center of the barrier beach. Let me pause there. Are you with me at all? So
I
far?
am. It makes perfect sense if there wasn't a road there.
Yes.
Because that's obviously going to be the issue. And then second part of my question would be, I understand from a standpoint of just looking at it, but when there are private owners that own the lots and that material is basically what you paid for, you own that, and now it's just getting spread out wherever you feel, wherever they think it's necessary. To me, I mean, there's some legality there where that's a product. That's something that's owned. It's got an owner, and I just don't understand how that is okay to spread it wherever it lays only because it was done by nature. It's as if, like, if your car rolled into the neighbor's driveway, it would still be your car. You follow?
Yes. All right. I'll address, I think, the 2 points there. One is, so why split the material rather than just push it back seaward? And you may disagree with me on this, and that's okay. I think we can continue to hash this out. But splitting the material is essentially accepting that this process is happening and finding compromise. So that material was on its way inland, and some of it is nearer to the seaward side, to the south, and some of it is nearer to the north. And splitting it down the middle is essentially a compromise to say, hey, this material can't stay on the road. For one, this road needs to be made drivable. And if we push it all south, we're going to continue to exacerbate erosion by creating these steep erosive inclines. So by splitting it north and south, we will have we will be slowly integrating overwash material into the barrier system itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if you disagree, that's completely okay. To your other point about ownership of the sediment, maybe I don't have the best response for you there, because it is tricky, and I just think, and I'm sure it's clear to you all, that all of these measures are temporary measures, and sediment goes where it wants to go. And to put your name on a rock and say that, well, whether or not this rock is in my property or their property is an impossible task to track and to try to return. And to do so would, in fact, be going against these natural processes that are playing out in real time. So I'm all for residents bringing in compatible sediment to nourish their beaches and dunes. But I think when the ocean is trying to find its equilibrium with the shape of the beach, it's inevitable that the process that you laid out there is going to happen over and over again.
And I think one thing
Can
that brings for me is just really quickly to add that material migrating to the northern side of the road is also important for the resilience coming from the other side of the road, because as sea level rise is happening, there's also vulnerability from the north. So when we talk about this and we talk about resiliency into the future, part of this is not on a parcel by parcel level, it is the barrier as a whole. And so some of these perspectives from us come from looking at how to maintain the barrier as a whole, to Kevin's point, making sure that it can be enjoyed in the future. Part of that is allowing the barrier to try to maintain itself. But we are all, we have different perspectives with different stakeholder interests, but this guidance that we've developed comes from the state guidance on what should happen in these coastal resource areas in terms
Justine,
of.
can I
Yeah,
jump in for a minute?
sure. I don't know if he's.
Now?
Was that yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'm concerned that we're turning East Beach into a sacrifice zone, where we're looking at natural processes and not private property rights. We're not addressing how it affects the people who have to live under the beach management plan. Okay, and I'm going to cover a couple points here. The first thing I just want to say is I did enjoy working with Connor on the plan. I know he put a lot of work into this. But let me address this first point about the road clearing policy. Okay, so the problem I have is that the plan has a bias, like I told you, towards natural processes that goes beyond the state's own guidelines for barrier beach management in Massachusetts. So there's a document that they've published, which is a reference tool for those charged with preparing barrier beach management plans. And it says management options for removal of overwash materials in roads and parking lots or back barrier nav channels is site specific. However, the preferred management option is to place the overwash material back into the pre-storm fore-dune location. Okay, and what you are doing is artificially transporting it away from that location.
Yes.
So what you are doing is actually artificially reducing the dune that is protecting the public infrastructure. You will have more overwash and more damage. That is a fact. Okay. So the plan absolutely fails to meet the standards. Okay. It also states that continually removing the material from the barrier may have the long-term effect of narrowing the barrier by starving the barrier of needed sediment. Again, your plan does just that. Will starve the barrier. Okay, you're sacrificing the properties on the south side, and you will increase overwash frequency, absolutely. And you will have the added effect of ticking off all the people on the north side too, because they're going to show up on their property and have a 2-foot berm of material that they don't want. Okay, now if you look at the differential effects of sea level rise versus the removal of material off of the south side, right? You are talking about fractions of an inch versus feet of material. Okay, and you have the velocity zone on the south side, and that berm, those dunes have protective nature. Okay, so there is that option in the guidelines, and if the material is placed back into pre-storm locations, it should, match what was there before. Secondly, there's additional guidelines that says when from the same document that says when considering the long-term stability of a barrier beach, some overtopping of dunes may be beneficial in certain areas to allow for storm-related wave energy release mechanisms to occur. And again, that removing that material prevents that. It also states that in the sole interest of protecting property and structure, artificial dune construction with dune grass plantings, etc., should begin following an overwash event. In summary, for maximum shoreline protection, it may be necessary that there be continuous, high volume, densely vegetated dune field, particularly foredunes, followed by a wide, gentle sloping beach or steep foreshore with a multiple berm backshore. Okay, so there are provisions in the guidelines for barrier beach management to allow for protecting property and structures. And you have biased this policy completely in one direction, basically sacrificing our properties, right? The government derives its power from the consent of the governed, right? And you are asking us to consent to the destruction, accelerated, man-made, artificial destruction of our properties, and that is not acceptable. This is not an acceptable plan with respect to how this is managed, even by your own guidelines. So we're lodging our complaint now, and we are asking that this be changed. We have a plan. The Westport's Board of Selectmen approved the plan. Everyone down there is happy with the plan. No one is happy with this plan, right? In addition to this, it's mathematically absurd. So if I, as a Southside property owner, pay for beach nourishment material, which protects the public infrastructure, and every overwash, the amount of material I have gets divided by 2. So I go from 8 parts of material to 4 parts to 2 parts to 1 part in 3 storm events. The next storm event, I'm down to 1/16 of the original protective material. It's a mathematically absurd
This is the guy who was
proposal.
out there taking the things.
Thanks, Tony.
Sure.
Yes, okay, so I can't respond to each one of those in succession, but we do hear you. And yes, I have read many of those lines that you highlight from the Barrier Beach Management Guidelines, and yeah, acknowledge that those things are there. I do also, want to point out in the coastal manual, there are several instances of acknowledgement that allowing sediment overwash processes to occur naturally without not impede those processes is a critical function to preservation of a barrier beach system in the long term. And I don't have any problem, like, we can continue talking about this because I do actually enjoy it, talking about it with you. And I can point you to those chapters, and then you can rebut me, and that's all great. But I think there's a lot of language in that, and we are attempting to distill it to the beach conditions that we have at East Beach. And East Beach is a unique beach, and it is eroding rapidly. And that actually, maybe it is, what's the word? Counterintuitive to think that that backing away, in a way, pushing material to the north is therefore the right response. Like, we need to have an aggressive response. We need to be pushing material back towards the ocean, but the ocean's going to win out in the end. And if the barrier is going to survive, it needs to bend so it doesn't break.
Yeah, so in natural systems, there's always, you can imagine in your own yard, right? There's always a balance between humans managing a natural system and what the natural system wants to do on its own, right? So, like, if you have a tree fall on your house, you wouldn't say, well, the natural process is that trees will fall, therefore we will mandate that tree must remain in your living room, right? That humans there have the ability to manage those natural processes with understanding of how they perform. And there's a balance between the interests of the humans that live there and the natural process, right? And I think, right, by doing nourishment, by using like natural slopes when we restore the material according to the guidelines that the state has already published, can accomplish both of those things, right? So I think we should be looking at solutions that don't sacrifice people's property, that accommodate the property rights of people, while at the same time using best practices within those bounds, right? And we've biased this so far to one side, right, that the people that own property are not going to consent to this. It's a non-starter from that perspective. So our input, I spent many hours providing input, but it was essentially ignored, unfortunately. And I think we need it. This document needs revision, and we want our input considered as property owners that have to live under it.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And I do, yeah, I do appreciate we have had many conversations, and I'm sorry that it feels like that has not made a change to the report as a result. Yes, this is probably, you're probably not going to appreciate me saying, can you tell us again? But this is the formal public process that will be the most, what's the word? Transparent. Conversations have been really good, and I think it's taken us to a much better place, and we're able to, really get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening here. And I think, but when it comes to changing language in the report, really highlighting the things you take issue with, and then elevating those within our process are going to be how those are addressed, because we may be, drafting this plan here, but this plan is not going to be adopted by Justine or I or Michael or Chris. It is, like you said, it's a public document, and it's going to be adopted by the select board. And so, some of these issues may have to go up to that level of discussion. So let's just document them now and address what we can address. And if we disagree at some point and then we'll see where to go from there.
I think, Tony, we'll come back to you, but we had some other hands. So
Sure.
Kevin, you were next, and then we have Brian and then Greg.
How you doing? My name is Brian. I actually own a property on the south side of East Beach Road. You guys recommend that we leave it sloped out. So why not bring all the material that hits the road back to the south side so we can keep that property graded out and not keep that sharp edge, that drop off. Because when the weather is nice, it's flat, it's smooth, the ocean's calm. Obviously, hurricane season comes in, the big storms come in, it pushes the material up. So when the storms settle out, why not put that material back with the natural grade it had before, instead of letting it keep eating away at it and taking the material and bringing it to the north side, which makes absolutely no sense.
I think I think we could help provide more guidance if it feels like it's not clear, but I do think there are many situations where if it was spread out, it is getting pushed all back to the south. We're talking about a very unique, large storm. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
All right.
But keep going, Brian. Keep going.
Water's going to move whatever it wants to move. Water's the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
So if you have a big storm come in, it pushes the material back, which doesn't happen every week. It happens during hurricane season. Why not nourish the beach back to where it was after the hurricane? Why take that material and bring it to the north side where it has nothing to do on the north side? And you guys recommend not making a sharp edge or a drop off, building up. So why not, after you have a storm, you go down there, you can see it's all dropped off from all the material that got pushed onto shore. Why not take that stuff and put it back to where it was? Why move it? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You guys want us to keep the slope. You guys recommend the slope. So why not take that material back and put it back to the slope instead of having that drop off?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that I hear you there. And I think, of the material that is pushed back to the south side properties, using that to fill areas of scour, which is, I think, those drop offs that you're talking about, is a great practice to create a gentle slope. I'm right there with you.
If we don't put that material back, next storm's going to come. Guess what? It's going to push it back even more. It's going to eat more. Why not put it back that way? It could do the same spot again.
Well, so the 2 points. One is that it even if you fill that drop off, it may look from the surface like we have restored the beach to its pre-storm condition, but there's a lot going on beneath the ocean surface that is not visible to us. So these hurricanes and storm waves are steepening the why am I blanking on the word? Subtidal beach shape as well. And so that is steepening. So if we took that language that Tony was providing us and tried to meet it literally, it would mean taking all the sediment that was overwash and trying to recreate not just what the beach looks like, but the subtidal beach, the offshore. And we're trying to reestablish a profile which from minus 30 feet to 10 feet above sea level has its form. By allowing some of the sediment to overwash and start to get incorporated into the center of the barrier beach, we are actually allowing that profile, which is a stable profile, to shift as a whole. So, gosh, I'm probably not describing this really well, but oh boy, I think, you know, we've been trying to draft a few kind of conceptual drawings that can get at this point and really show you, you know, these different slopes and what's happening beneath the surface, what's happening above the surface. But at the end of the day, what it's coming down to is that the beach and the ocean are in a back and forth play, and us getting in the way of that is going to create a situation that is unnatural and likely to create more erosion.
All right.
Yeah.
All
Thanks,
set.
Brian.
Thank you.
But all of this to say again, none of this is against the idea that you can bring sediment in addition to.
No, I just figured it would make sense to put it where it came back from.
Yeah.
It's like if you have a dent and you keep hitting it, the dent's gonna get bigger. If you have a dent, you fix it, and then you hit it again, guess what? That dent's not gonna be bigger. It's gonna be the same size. So why not just fill the dent back in?
Yeah, and I think we should fill those scarps in. I think you're right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your
think
question. I'm sorry if I
I think-
didn't answer all the way.
I think Greg was next, and then we can go back to Kevin because I think we accidentally skipped him.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
We appreciate this opportunity. I'm Gregor McGregor. I'm the principal and founder of the McGregor Law Group, an environmental law firm, land use, real estate, energy, and litigation in Boston. I've been hired by the association, from which you've heard tonight, in order to look at the legal implications and aspects of your plan. And some of the comments you've heard tonight are the beginning of input on that subject, such as was just mentioned, and there'll be others. We'll take advantage of your comment period, however long or short it is, and get written comments in. And our comments from our firm, because we've been hired to look at the plan, its origins, its references, its presumptions, its findings, the quality of its data, and its conflicts with previous plans and guidances and policies of the state and local government and private agreements struck with the select board here, will be in our comments. Briefly, I'll just say you've heard from the association, it's dead serious. They're not just complaining about being cut out of the process, which you have not. It's a excellent public participation program with the highest quality people. And furthermore, Connor's done the best he can with what he has, and I commend him, as have you. But our takeaway point tonight, in brief, is that this plan, for all it is and isn't, does not take account of the property or real estate and related financial and recreational and ownership and tax revenue implications of implementing this plan. It's not just that cobbles were, if you will, stolen from East Beach over the many years and should have been replaced there, and the result is an East Beach that is a shadow of what it should be right now and the public resource it should be. It's not just that you have a plan that you're going to slice the cobbles down the middle on the road and push half to the left and half to the right, half to the south, half to the north without permission, for not replacing the cobbles on the property from which it came from and putting cobbles on the north side where people don't want them. And as I read the plan, there'll be some prohibition on them removing it. Maybe even a prohibition on them regrading it. The only reference I heard tonight is, well, there'll be more elevation on the north side, and I guess the implication is that's always good. There is more to that. There will be adverse property tax implications. The town will get less money if properties are lost and disappear because of a plan approved by and implemented by the town government. If you want to put material on property that wasn't there, there are taking implications. My point is only there are real estate implications that ought to be included in any plan for long-term, and I mean this is very long-term, land management of a public-private resource. I like the idea that was mentioned of a public-private partnership. I like the idea of public and private fundraising and a mix of grants and private monies and gifts and other fundraising methods to help fund the reality of a long-term program. I like it enlisting the people who are the stakeholders on site to making the plan work and building a constituency that supports its long-term continuance. So in closing, I will file comments from our firm and advise the client association on the legal implications, which we think are also raised by this plan. Our compliments so far. We hope for our input to be accepted, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
Welcome.
Kevin, I think you were next.
Just a couple of quick things that I wanted to mention to Brian's point in regards to the material going back to the south side of the road. Right now, we currently have an agreement in place with the town of Westport, which was voted on by the select board last year in regards to taking any materials and ensuring that it gets to the south side of East Beach Road as much as possible. And last August, when we had a small washover, that was somewhat evident. We enlisted the help of one of the selectmen to actually go down and speak directly with the highway department to ensure that that was truly happening. We were proactive as a community in clearing the road as best we could of anything that might have washed up, and, you know, took care of our neighbors as it should be, you know. So there is a policy in place to address that, you know. So, you know, my thoughts are for the short term, which I believe will happen as we continue to work on this and hopefully well past February 13th, that we stick to the existing policy as adopted by the local board of selectmen. Because at the end, we don't want to abandon East Beach Road. Every day that goes by is another day closer to that storm that we're all dreading, and we could wind up having a more important conversation than we're already having now. And this conversation, to me, is rather important.
That's a great point, Kevin. And the current policy does stand. So if there was a storm tomorrow, the interim policy is in place and we are in the planning process. So what is in this draft plan is not what would happen. The interim policy is what will be carried throughout the winter as we go through this process and we continue to talk and make revisions to the plan.
And I'm going to continue to keep open channels with all elements of the town government to ensure that there's good communication and this process continues in good faith to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Kevin. I think I see Tony's hand again. I want to just note that we have 9 minutes left. And I say that, and I've heard the February 13th deadline mentioned a few times. We are happy to come back and continue talking to you. Kevin, I know that we have worked with you as a part of this stakeholder process, and we can continue to find a time to come back and talk to this community and see what other questions you have. So please let us know as you're responding to comments about the draft. We're happy to accept questions. If you feel like you asked a question tonight and it wasn't answered fully, ask it again and give us a moment maybe to write up a more thoughtful response. So we're happy to continue talking to you. February 13th is just a deadline for us to get initial comments in the door so that we can gather that feedback and respond. So I see Tony's hand up next.
Hi, Justine. Yeah, so regarding that deadline, is there a time where the comment period will close? Initially, it said February 13th. This document was, approximately a year in the making. We have about 3 weeks to comment, right? We're asking if there would be an extension and what that date would be.
Yeah, we can get back to you. We can talk about it internally. We'd appreciate it if you could get them in. We are under, this grant has a timeline with deliverables we're trying to meet. So that's why we had set that initial deadline. If you feel like that's something you can't meet and you need more time, we can absolutely provide you with some more time. So
Oh.
Tony, we'll talk and
Right.
we'll figure out if you need more time, we can give it to you for sure.
Okay, all right, and then just fundamental. This is like a fundamental type question here.
He's
Um,
really good.
Where is the other half of the plan that helps protect the beach? So this plan here doesn't really address protecting the beach from a long-term perspective, right? In a way that's robust, right? Part of managing something is if it's broken, to start with repairing it, not ignoring the fact that it's broken. Okay, so if I may just share very briefly, share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I see a series of Excel documents.
Okay, all right, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Okay. So this slide here just shows an analysis of the amount of cobble that was removed by road clearing operations since about 2010, relative to the same calculation of sea level rise based on the Woods Hole tidal gauge, right? So you can see that there's been a significant effect, from a road clearing policy perspective in the amount of cobble that's removed. And you can see that here in this picture, right? Where you can just look at the volume of what is being taken off the beach relative to what remains. It's actually shocking, okay? And this process was repeated 2.5 times in one winter, right? And continued for decades, right? So the starting point for where we're at is that the beach was essentially strip mined of its protective berm. And so, if I'm looking at from a management perspective, right, if I go to my doctors and ask for, a plan to manage my health, right, and I have an operable cancerous tumor and a broken leg, and he ignores that and then proceeds to talk about, you should go for a walk every day. That's probably not a good plan because it doesn't assess the current state and the problems associated with it. So I personally would like to see, more in the plan to protect the beach and to address the removal of the berm. And there are, a number of very creative solutions, including public-private partnerships and so on that I've discussed with Connor briefly that should be assessed as part of the plan. Because again, if we're talking about managing the beach and the beach the starting point is that it's in a damaged state, right? That can't be ignored. That has to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. We've talked about the cobble removal in the past, and I don't know, what's the word? Making up for any sort of past wrong is not something that you're good, that I'm likely going to be able to give you, frankly.
Well,
this is a management plan. It's for day-to-day coordination of departments. We are working with the highway department to steer them in the right direction. And this is essentially taking stock of where we are today and looking forward. And, rehashing the past is, if that's what you continue to want to do, is something that you'll need to do with the town, because we just can't we're just not the ones that are going to give you the thing that you need at the end
Yeah,
of the
I
day.
guess my angle is a little bit different than that. So the planning board, right, which sponsored this grant, created the the Climate Resiliency Committee. And one of the things that we did is vote on a series of recommendations for East Beach itself. And so one of those resolutions, which was voted on and passed last year, was to recommend the preservation of East Beach as a coastal resource for future generations, specifically in place of managed retreat. And preservation means working to preserve East Beach as a coastal resource for future generations through means such as beach nourishment and maintaining public infrastructure, including East Beach Road, right? So as part of the beach management plan, right, consistent with the guidance coming out of the Climate Resiliency Committee, right, we would like to see elements of the management plan that are oriented towards preservation. So that's the angle that I'm discussing here.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, we certainly have that to some degree. I know it's not to the degree that you like. The large scale restoration exploration came up with results that are potentially feasible if fundable. And I think that that's where the big question comes. The scale of nourishment that might be effective on some level was 13.6 to 15 or 13 to 15.6 million dollars or something like that. And again, only a temporary solution because this trend is not necessarily reversible.
Yeah. I guess my angle is slightly different here. So you understand the large scale, like more sand heavy kind of nourishment, but there's also going on here. All the residents on the south side have NOIs. We are doing nourishment. We found that cobble is a lot more resilient than sand, right? It tends to just move around. I think Rebecca said it, where the sand can be, washed more inward, washed out to sea. Like the cobble tends to not move as much, and it might be moved slightly landward, but it tends to be more resilient, right? So a smaller scale, primarily private but coordinated effort that it is fundable. I think there should be some work along those lines because that's a doable thing. And I think that would take steps towards that goal of preservation, right? And I have recommendations here. There is material actually stored on the north side of the road by the town, part of a small fraction of what was taken in those pictures. And then there's things like bulk purchases that the town could do, or something creative like a tax rebate where they recognize that money spent on beach nourishment by property owners is protecting their public infrastructure, for example. So I do think that there's a number of angles that could be explored on that private, more doable and more durable mix kind of level.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I think this is a great place to end off. I think as we continue to think about the resiliency of this place and thinking about its ability to adapt and respond to storm damage, a lot of things were brought up tonight that are super helpful for us to think about. Again, please give us the opportunity to respond to these comments. And Tony, we can continue to talk if you feel like you need more time to prepare comments. But we will come back to you. If you were someone who didn't find out about this meeting because you didn't get an email from me, I ask that you send me a note. I'm going to just throw my email address back on the screen really quick. So send me a note, and I want to add your email to my list so that when we meet again, you get a direct email from me to make sure that you're able to attend.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And again, we have recorded this, so let us know if anyone needs a recording because they weren't able to attend tonight.